got quite quickly fixed, but still Google picked it up. Pages were deleted from the index. We had to like resubmit. So this whole process, basically, we were like chatting with each other, and we said like, oh, we're the rescue rangers of the companies. Like, imagine if like this would have continued for a longer time. So that's why basically the name Digital Rescue Rangers came from.
That's amazing. So I'd love to dive into the topic of the day, which is doing website migrations. If I go back to 2021 when we met, I think at the time you were working with Randstad, and you're in the middle of a project, the kind of scale that at the time I'd never heard of anything like this. Can you walk us through the remit that you were working through when you were doing that migration project with Randstad?
Yeah, so that's basically with Randstad we're operating in 42 markets, and then in some markets they were having multiple sites. So basically we built a whole CMS, new platform, and we went from the old one to the new one. These websites have, as a minimum, 200, 300,000 URLs, and that was like as a minimum. Basically, like the whole flow of like making sure that the new platform is SEO friendly, the migration step, that was basically, and then the actual migration that we did basically repeated for all like 52 sites, just at Randstad alone.
Wow. And were you going from a whole bunch of different tech platforms? Did each of the sites, was it possible for any of the sites to have a different tech stack, or were they all built on the same stack to start?
The most of them were built on the same stack. And others, because on the Randstad it has sub-brands, so a couple of them were built on different stack.
Crazy. Okay, so do you want to walk us through what some of the lessons that you learned and how to execute a flawless migration? Do you want to share your screen and walk us through that?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
So let me share my screen. I think you're able to see it now, right?
Yes, for sure.
So I just prepared a few slides, but basically this is what I told already. So 17 years in the field. I'm also quite always trying to improve myself. So I'm currently working on my third master, and then trying not to do it like a normal university, but trying to get the highest of the highest. So that I do as well. So it's quite hectic sometimes. But then about site migrations. So especially for a lot of SEOs, this is like a headache topic, and there's a very good reason for, because it can go really, really wrong. So this is one example of WooCommerce who tried to, at that time, move their pages to woo.com, and it basically deleted all the traffic, and it was so bad that they just decided to go back to the old domain. So with site migrations, as soon as you hear it up, it's good to get directly involved, because if SEO is involved on like every step and very early in the process, it can go relatively safe. But if not, or like if not like with full attention, it can go really, really wrong. And basically what I find is that preparation is key. So the better I prepare in terms of roadmap, getting the details, getting the scope, who's responsible for what, getting the timeline as well, that really helps to get a better migration process. And there's a couple of key decisions basically, or like questions that come up. First of all, it's very important to know like what is the platform that you're going to. If you currently have like a slow platform and you go to like a much more modern, faster, cleaner code, that sounds good. If you go to, for example, JavaScript framework, which are very popular nowadays, React, etc., that can be very fast, but it has like an extra level of complexity. For example, making sure that you make use of server-side rendering, that the content is directly in the initial HTML, so Google can very quickly see it. So
as you started to talk about that, I had already written down SSR. Like I was going to ask you about it.
Yes. So and nowadays, like JavaScript frameworks, or over the last years, are very, very popular. A lot of enterprises where I work with, they are using React. And so that's something to be very aware of. And then specifically about this one, so the question about server-side rendering or not. So anything static, content pages, content on the site, that should be like server-side rendered. But for example, on the case of Monster, if we show related jobs, so we have an article and we want to show like what are the related jobs for this article, then we don't want to have that static, because it could be that this job like goes offline because it's fulfilled. So we don't want to have the experience that if user clicks on it and it says, okay, this job was gone. So that's why, like, for anything that is not expected to change, like if a few days or maybe even just daily, that can be server-side rendered. But anything that we need to make sure like it's very fresh, and it depends, for example, on the user query or user behavior, that is dynamic loaded in, more appropriate.
So anything that deserves freshness, your client-side rendering, you're saying?
If it like so in the and when it's not the key topic of the page, for example, so
Yeah.
we want that the content is also fresh, but if that is dynamically loaded in, then you get an issue with indexation.
Got it. Okay.
And maybe on that perspective first. So Google first scrolls the content in the initial HTML, and then it comes back later in JavaScript. JavaScript takes 9 times more time than crawling HTML, and large language models don't crawl JavaScript, for example. So therefore, also Google recommends to have all your content that you want to have indexed directly in the initial HTML, so directly what Google can see.
That's wild, the 9x number. We had a discussion last night on Clubhouse about how important it was to have everything available in the HTML because of the cost and the time. But to put a number like 9x on the time is crazy.
Yeah, I think that came both from research from Google as well as another agency who did a research on that, and they also found 9 times.
Yeah, wild.
Then another question which comes very often up, like, or basically if you change the domain name, you need to change URLs. So that's a more logical question. But when we do migration, we get a lot of times like, oh, can we change this folder structure? Or can we make these URLs more simpler? And if you want to maintain SEO traffic, that's usually not a good idea. So it's the best to keep the URLs the same, unless your old site is like really, really bad. And so it's a clear improvement, then it's fine. But otherwise, I'll just get the tissue. I had allergies, so. But otherwise, it's recommended to keep your URLs the same. So the way, actually, about this topic on John Muller from Google, he's also saying that it has like very rarely a benefit, and that it imposes a high risk for the traffic. So he also ends like some risk, usually no gain, and basically means like not a good idea. So that's why Google also don't recommend changing URLs. So the arguments that I then often use in my conversation is basically to give an estimation, like if you want to change the URLs, it has an impact of 15 to 30% of your traffic, if you do it in a decent migration. These amounts are coming from, the 15% are coming from the original PageRank document of Google. And Google was using first 15% dilution as well on the redirect. Or more 6-7 years ago, Gary Eels said that there's no dilution anymore of redirect value. However, with the website we did and the migration, even at Randstad, we see that even if we keep all the URLs the same, there's some loss of SEO value. So that's why from our experience, we don't agree with the 0%. And this percentage is also coming from Ignite Visibility. They also shared in the blog their experience. So instead of like you will lose some SEO value. It's easier for the higher management to have like a number, because then we can do like calculations. Okay, this is the current traffic. This is the potential traffic that is at loss. And is it then a good idea to change the domain or change the URL or not?
It seems like everybody gets so excited to change URLs too. Clients are like, hey, we got to do this. I want to change this and that and this and that. It's like, no, bad idea. The data backs it up too.
Yeah. And even so, if URLs would be changed, redirects need to be mapped, etc. But then also internal redirects need to be updated. So although the user will land on the correct page, there's an extra step, and that's why Google also recommends to update those internal links. So basically, it's like more risk for your SEO traffic, more work for development and for the SEO. So and there's no positive ROI. So that's basically how I try to use those points in my conversations.
Love that. Only risk, no reward.
Exactly. And then from a preparation side, so it's basically the earlier you hear about the migration, the better is to get involved to make sure we have like the maximum influence as SEO. So even like in the initial state, like what will be the platform, what is the purpose, etc. And then even before things are being built, so in terms of the wireframe pages, if there's a new design, to make sure to already check, like, okay, is there enough place for content included? So that's why it's basically good to get as early as involved as possible. And then from if the platform needs to be rebuilt, then what I usually do is I create a document for SEO requirements for the developers, that before they start building, they know already like what are requirements, so there's less of a review at the later stage. Like at one enterprise site, this became a bit extreme because I had a document of 38 pages of SEO requirements, and literally it was a very long document. Literally specifying everything, like how should an image URL be, like with hyphens separated, small case, the format, and like try not to upload it as like a huge file. And then like, so all the different aspects, images, videos, URL structure, folder structure, canonicals, href length, sitemaps, and so all these things together, having that. I'm not sure if developers all really go through it, but in case they have a question, that they can use it as a reference. Like, this is what we have agreed on in the beginning. And then at any point later, if they have questions, or they can use it as a reference to build their products. So that hopefully, then if you come at the review stage, go ahead.
Quick detour on that. So do you demand in your dev workflow, whenever they're like pushing through a sprint, that they have to meet all of the SEO requirements, or it's a failed build? Like, have you been able to argue for that?
So what we had at Randstad is that for every component that was being built, there was an SEO UEE check. So basically, even if it's not SEO or for SEO purposes, we had to validate and say, okay, this is fine. Because in the end, everything on the website is influencing SEO. So that's why we had that built in. When teams became larger, it was a bit difficult to manage, because then we had to say, okay, these are not stories affecting SEO, so we had to filter it a bit down. But basically making sure that when stories we developed, that we were, for each story, that we had something to say as well, a UE check.
Okay, cool.
And I think, okay, I'll come to later to that. Another very, very important part is making sure you have a list of all the URLs. And so that means combining different sources, Google Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, which is not here on it, analytics, backlinks, sitemaps, site crawlers, log files, and just merge everything together, clean them up, remove the parameters, etc., and then have a clean list. That will help, first of all, to see like if pages have zero traffic, it's okay, they're less important, but at least make sure that all the pages that generated traffic, that they are included in the scope of migration. What we had in the beginning of migrations is that when we made these exports, and then when we started migrating, that the content team, because other people also work on the site, that they published extra pages and we were not aware of them. So we were like, which that caused an issue after go live. So that's why we learned that before we basically start the actual migration, or basically the start of the content freeze, we need to repeat this process again, just to make sure that any pages that have been created, that they are included in the final list to migrate.
I love that focus on what actually drives traffic, because that's the only thing that's part of your potential loss, right? So
Yeah.
like focus on what matters.
Yeah. And then sometimes there are pages with, it's like a legal requirement to have them on the site. They don't have a lot of traffic. So it's just good to double check, like, is there anything that's like, is very important to move?
Yep.
And then the more in detail, the more laid out, like who's going to do what, which phase. We used to work with spreadsheets, and then like the waterfall basically planning, where we specify if this person is doing this. So we had that ready for every migration, and that worked very structured. And then also having like weekly meetings about how are we proceeding with the plan. But I think it's very good at the beginning to make sure that everybody knows their responsibilities, what is expected, for which date, and that should all be included in the project plan. So it's not necessarily a project plan for SEO, it's basically a product plan for the whole migration.
Who owns that? What role owns the plan?
We had that it was the product owner, but then basically there were the different departments that were working together, like analytics, SEO, paid search team. So we all had our share basically in the plan. And then to actually prevent that, like, or when developers basically become very annoyed, is then when they almost build with, or they're done with building and they're almost ready to go live, and then comes SEO in and basically says like, oh, these are 20 things that it's not SEO friendly, please do it again, while they are stuck with their initial deadline. So it's very important that instead of reviewing at the end when they already build most of their things, to actually see if you can review components or review templates. So as soon maybe as 1 or 2 sprints are finished, they have something delivered to already review at that stage. And that will make sure that, first of all, you catch things earlier, but also that those things that we flag are then also included for the next components. So that's why it's better to review throughout the migration process and then still have your like pre-audit, go live day audit and afterwards. But instead of doing everything at the end or when the site is almost ready to go live. And I added here migration checklist as well. I will get back to it later, but in case you want to see what are the things that I look at. And this very differs per site, because in this one, I don't think I included structured data. And this depends per e-commerce site or per job board. So, but if you want to have a base, you can copy this sheet. So a couple of things to minimize the traffic loss is basically to migrate all the pages, and I must say pages that had traffic. And sometimes what happens is that people say like, oh, these pages have like 10, 20 visitors. They're not really important. Let's kill them. But then if you have like 100,000 pages of these 10, 20, then together, if you sum it up, it's still quite some important traffic. So that's why I prefer to at least migrate all pages that have traffic and to minimize any like risk on that. I did work with another client and they said, no, we don't want to do that. We have millions of pages and we want to move only with a clean version to the new site. So there we actually switched it around. We said, okay, first then clean up the site like how you want, have then a 5-month break. So basically the impact of that upgrade or that cleanup basically is stabled out. And then we start the migration. So we still isolate the impact of the migration and not changing things at the same time.
So that's fascinating. That delay, the 5 month delay. So like, how much time do you typically like to have to lead up to do a migration? And there's the ideal of, hey, I want 5 month lead time or whatever. But then there are times that you get brought in when another company fails at any step along the way through this project plans, right? So it's like, that's best case. What's the worst case you've hit?
The worst case is like, hey, we just had a migration, traffic is going down. Can you check why?
Yeah.
And then basically the damage is already done. So in this specific case, it's an enterprise client, and it was like a 2-year project. So they told me, and I had like deliverables in the beginning. So that was the company where I made the 38-page document for. So I told to them like, okay, then first do these cleanup changes. Then in the meantime, I will create this document. We make sure that everything is detailed, the project plan, etc. And then by the time that we start, we have this 5 months break basically. But that's not with all the clients. Some clients indeed are like, we need help now because we went live and traffic is dropping. And that's actually, then you need to go back to like archive or see like what was the previous content on that website. If you could still find it. And another very important one is to isolate the migration from anything else. It's actually the same or like a follow-up. If you isolate the migration, you can see if traffic goes up or down. You can see, okay, this is due to the migration, and spot any bugs or errors that come along. If you do content updates at the same time, which often the client wants, because they go live with a website, they want to have fresh content, maybe reduce some content, and then it becomes really, really messy. That was actually with the first site that we had with Randstad and went live. The local team, they made still updates. And then we had a migration, URLs were changed, which were not initially in my list. Existing URLs, they were not there anymore. Pages were shorter. So it just creates a mess and it leads to traffic decline. So that's why it's important to just migrate a website and then take, for example, like 3 months break. So you can see, okay, this was the impact of the migration, it went well or not. And then start doing content updates.
Quick question from the audience. We've got two. We're going to get to the first one in a little bit, but the second one is how to find the old content if the site has already been migrated.
Yeah.
What tools do you rely on?
So I often go to archive.org. That usually works for larger websites. That's actually my go-to point.
Got it.
But for smaller or like less popular pages, they often don't have the content. But so archive.org is my go-to.
If they have, let's say they have the BigQuery export set up pre-migration, you can probably lean into that. Like, hey, if a page gets impressions, that's at least that's a good starting point probably too, right?
Yeah, as a data source. But then you still need to know what content was on that page.
Oof. It gets harder.
Yeah. So that's why for now, it would be nice to know if there are any other tools out there. But for now, the tool that I only know that does this is archive.org. Then, in terms of redirects, in case pages need to be redirected, it's highly recommended to like one-on-one redirects. If we have articles and we just say, okay, we redirect to this category, Google sees that the new page is not giving the same answer as the old one, and basically it will just delete the traffic. And also in the Google documentation, it also said it basically will dilute the SEO link juice basically coming from that page. So it's just when you create a one-on-one or when you create redirects, they need to be one-on-one, going to the page with the same information. So that's a very important one.
Is that a hill that you're willing to die on, as it were, when you're talking with stakeholders about managing a future migration? Would you put it at that level of importance, like, or is it like we're always shooting for that, but we get to achieve it 10% of the time, or is it like
No, no,
how?
no. I would go I would go to do these sheets. I was working until like my 2 a.m., 3 a.m., getting all those redirects done. Just
Yeah,
to because in the end, like at Randstad, I was the global SEO manager. I would be accountable if the traffic goes down. So I was like, I want to make sure like it's like excellent and there's no traffic loss. So that's why like these one-on-one redirects like if and suddenly you come to pages with like 10 traffic, okay, and there are not a lot of them, 10 visitors, okay. But usually I try to use for everything the one-on-one redirects.
got it.
These days, I know that people are using AI tools as well. I do find that can speed it up, but it's important to make sure that it's the same page or relevant content. One thing that we had, for example, with Monster is that we changed the province or the region name, and that very likely wouldn't have caught with tools as ChatGPT at that time. That was not available yet.
Mm.
But if you asked ChatGPT or other tools to create redirects, make sure you review them very carefully. So to make sure you still have like the one-on-one redirects.
You mean AI sometimes can be problematic? Who would have thunk?
Who would have thought that AI sometimes gives wrong wrong answers, right?
Oh yeah.
And then like the big day basically on go live, there are something like very common. So first of all, or common to go wrong. So first of all, as soon as the website goes live, it's important that the redirects need to be there. Usually what we used to do is implement the redirects already on the development domain, test them all there, see if it works, and just change basically developers push the site live and then the redirects were already there. But yeah, just to make sure that Google doesn't see the URLs as 404s, those should be actually like instantly going live at the same time. And another thing, very, very important, small thing can be overlooked. But often on development sites in the robots.txt, it says like, don't crawl this site. And then when you go live, it's very important to update the robots.txt. Sometimes we found it out one day later. It's not so good. So this is something to be very aware of.
Back in 2018, I was at MozCon and I talked to members of the largest real estate website in the United States what their biggest mistake ever was. And two issues were one, de-indexing the entire site, which meant that Google like de-indexed millions of pages over a period of a week. And then the second thing was they pushed live an infinite crawl loop, which had the opposite impact of indexing millions of pages that just went deeper and deeper into the structure. So yeah, that stuff matters. Robots.txt.
Yeah.
Quick question. What is your favorite and least favorite days of the week to go live on?
Good question, actually. We usually do Tuesday and Thursday.
Got it. And
So,
Friday is never, right? Never,
no,
ever, ever launch on Friday.
yeah. And the reason for that is if something goes wrong, you want to make sure that the developers are available. So when you go live on a Friday, it's weekend. You don't want to necessarily disturb them or they have other plans. So that's why we prefer we go live on a Tuesday. Because then we still have the days after for testing and reach out to any of the developers if needed. At the time when we had, for example, 2 migrations in 1 week, we were choosing Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay, I interrupted you. I think you were about to hit the sitemaps piece.
Yeah, just in case the website changes, then make sure that the sitemaps are also updated in Google and Bing's webmaster tools. So before they go live, there's a technical audit, and sometimes it looks if everything is fine. there. Links are going to the correct environment, etc. But then when you go live, sometimes the links are hard coded, which should not be have done. So that's why immediately on the go live date, it's important to do a crawl to make sure, like, or to double check, are there not any links pointing to the dev domain. We had that happened a couple of times, and then basically the development domain was getting indexed, and then it was like a hassle to get them out of the index again. So it's just on go live date, make sure you check for the links, besides like all the broken links, like the normal technical audit. Make sure to also check for links to the development domain.
Do you ever do a soft launch where you sort of have a two-stage where you push rel canonicals in advance of the actual migration, or you like have the new server live enough that you can set rel canonicals to point to whatever the new URL pattern is and then go live, or do you always do just a hard, or do you?
Yeah, so usually I do like a hard one because it's a change of, or basically we stay on the same domain name. So it's just like a replacement. With a new migration that is coming up, there we're probably going to launch or move like a subsection of the site. And that's also related to email marketing, because for email marketing, if you have like a new domain, like it's not so much information can land in the spam box. So actually they need to basically warm the domain up. And then we said, okay, also for SEO purposes, we'll move like one section of the site to that domain as well, and then move the bunch. But usually, because we stay on the same domain, it's just like a hard switch.
Mm, I love that. I had not considered the email marketing impact, even though, like for the SEO community, we're about to launch our weekly newsletters or bi-weekly newsletters, and it's like we've just spent the past month warming up our domains. So like, it should have occurred to me. I never have thought about email marketing impact as part of a migration before.
Yeah, and that's actually the nice thing about this migration. You work so closely with all the different departments together. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's and like with the impact of the cookie banner, the slowing down the loading time, etc. So it's also a nice collaboration project with the different departments.
Hmm.
And after the go live, especially, I was doing like an audit, like I think every 3 days, and then from 2 weeks, once a week, and then for 1 month. So I basically called it like aftercare, and to spot any issues. Especially in the first days after go live, we want to make sure that we find issues before Google does. So that's why the frequency is much higher. When we see like the impact on the search results, that usually came in like 2 to 3 weeks after we went live. So there's a bit of delay because Google is sending traffic, but then it doesn't crawl all the pages of the site, at least not with enterprise, at the same day. So we before then process the pages and adjust the rankings. So usually it takes like 2 to 3 weeks before we saw the first initial impact of the migration.
Awesome. So this is a perfect opportunity to ask you, tell us about your worst migration mistakes that you learned the hard way.
I think the worst one is basically when people are working on the same time on content and you're trying to do the redirects, etc.
Mm,
Then things become really, really messy. Or people still change your redirect file
oh no.
and don't check the URLs, and then they're redirecting to 404s, and then you need to fix them again. So yeah, so that's why I have a way of focus on isolating things. Like, okay, this was your time that you have time for content, and now we start a migration, so no content changes, basically.
So let's rewind to that 5 month pause. Is that a content freeze for that whole 5 months?
Um,
How do you think through that, I guess?
It's not a full content freeze, but it's
Yeah,
basically they wanted to clean up pages from the site, and it
yeah.
basically, so they wanted to delete 30% of the pages of a
Mm,
website that has more than 5 million URLs.
mm,
So that's quite a lot. basically means that they are deleting 1 to 2 million URLs of the site. And so that project we want to have finished 5 months before. They could still like make changes to the website until like the view content freeze, until we start moving the pages over. But that project about deleting the pages in large scale, that needed to be completed 5 months before we start.
Got it. Okay. Ooh, and you're already, it's funny, your next slide was like totally in line with where my head was at about things going wrong.
Yeah. So the very thing question was like on the day of go live or the day after, everything goes wrong, like all the traffic is gone, and then I was like, but have you checked your analytics code? Like, is it measuring correctly? And so that was if somebody says that traffic is down across all channels, it's like okay, there's an analytics issue, and there's not necessarily an SEO issue, because if it would be SEO, you would see SEO traffic going down, but the other channels still relatively stable. But if everything is down, then you know, okay, there's something with the tracking. So that's one, making sure that the tracking, or basically a pitfall that that the tracking was not accurately done. Another thing is I got like search is going down, etc. But paid search and SEO combined. And then I was like, but did you activated your paid campaigns? And then we're like, oh. So it's also like when a new site goes live, during the migration, we put it on pause to make sure that we don't send any traffic to maybe like temporary not available pages. And then a couple of hours after go live to make sure the site is stable, we boot the campaign on again. But sometimes this step gets forgotten.
A lot of folks are not thinking about talking to the paid team, and that can be a tragedy and a costly one,
Yeah,
based on how much money we spend on ads at scale.
yeah.
Wild.
And I'm thinking what other common, just like small things like sometimes the decline is in a small corner basically. So the robots txt something, it's a very tiny thing, but if you miss that step, it has like it has a large impact. Those are a bit of the common pitfalls that I came across.
That's awesome.
And I think, yeah, that was it actually from my end.
Ooh, questions. We've got some stacked up in our channel here. Okay. How do you justify the cost of maintaining 301 redirects indefinitely? Oops.
Yeah.
Can you stop share? There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
So I try to refer as much as possible to Google sources, so they know it's not just from me or from a SEO consultant, but it's Google who says it. Google has in their in their guidelines that the redirects need to be live for 1 year in order to properly transfer the SEO value to the new URLs. But for any SEO that, for example, any pages that have backlinks, that actually could be indefinitely. So in terms of like trade-off, because sometimes a lot of redirects can slow down the site, is making sure that at least live for 1 year, and then to check like for which URLs still have backlinks, to keep those on, but for example, remove others.
It does seem like there's been a lot of chatter in the past year about how that 1 year threshold has been really clearly stated by Google and proven to be effective in testing. Like a lot of folks have tested that and have found that that 1 year timeline makes a lot of sense. Quick question. Your migration checklist. Let's wrap up the migration part of our discussion. I'm going to just show the link for everybody. Do you want us to just kind of wrap up high level the checklist again for us?
Yeah, I will actually share it
again, just so everybody can get the URL.
Yeah, and I will share my screen at the same time.
What I found interesting so far is just like the scope of the other teams that you're integrating with is larger than what I'd considered. And then also, one thing that occurred to me is that doing a migration is a huge opportunity for everything to go wrong and that's what we always focus on, is like the loss part of the equation. But what I was hearing from you was how large of an opportunity it is to build on your relationships with the other teams when it goes right, and that
Yeah.
you're going to make them the heroes in the process, right? If they execute all their steps right. And it's an opportunity for you to build fantastic relationships with other teams. That was something that occurred to me while you were talking.
And I also think it's a great opportunity sometimes because, especially if the website or the platform is a bit old and currently there are faster solutions available. So it's also an opportunity to make things faster, which of course is also good for the user. But I also find it nice because it's basically you do a project, it goes live and everything done, and then it's like, okay, next. So it makes it very dynamic, a dynamic process. And so it's basically like with all of them, like the product owner, the developers, feels like you're together in a roller coaster, and to make sure that everything gets delivered good, and to be sure you stay in the schedule for the next one. But yeah, it's it's interesting teamwork together.
Nice. Now, on this checklist, just give us a quick high level. We don't have to go line by line on it.
Yeah. So I basically had per category. So for example, site setup, the URLs, navigation. What are things to keep in mind? So basically, what is the topic and what kind of actions would be good to look into? Here, for example, like URL contain lower cases only. If you have a block that gets automatically created based on the title of the article, that, for example, words, that's an option, by the way, words or are filtered out of the URL. WordPress is doing that sometimes, and we also use that to in our custom platform to make URLs a bit shorter. So it's just a nice, like, when you review a lot of components or websites, it's nice to have a template. And at the start of the project, it's good to check, like, are all the items that I want to review, is it in it? But then especially if you go in a fast pace, it's very handy to just go down the checklist and see, okay, have I looked at these items, and make sure not to forget any important parts.
Now, someone else asked, what tools do you use to QA the audit checklist? Seems manual.
Yeah, a lot of it's manual.
Mm-hmm.
Manual and Screaming Frog, basically. Screaming Frog is the ad hoc go-to tool that I use for the crawls. So, for example, like URLs are small case. Those would be things, or parameters. No parameters are being used. Those are things that would be good to check with Screaming Frog. Other ones, like the menu is basically available if JavaScript is disabled. Those are things that I would test manually.
When you're setting up, I mean, a lot of the stuff you're doing is for sites that have millions or hundreds or billions of pages. You're just doing small subsections of content, right? You just have representative based on template type or something like that.
You mean in terms of the review?
Yeah, in terms of the crawl, like you're just looking at representative pages per template kind of thing.
Yeah, in the first phase, I would review components. So the accordion component, is it the way how I prefer is that when JavaScript is disabled, that the accordion is expanded and that the content is visible on the screen, and that JavaScript is used to collapse it. That's the way how I usually prefer to have the accordion programmed. So by doing that, as soon as the component is built, or like a couple of those stories have been built, and then they say, okay, now it's ready for review. So that's like the first level. And then when basically a page template is ready, then I review the template. Okay, is the clean code? Is the header structure correct? Is it following a semantic order? So nicely from H2, H1, H2, if it's subheader, H3. And then basically this one is as a final check before the site goes live, because this basically includes all the items.
Oh my goodness. Keep going. How many rows are there?
This is 88.
Just there's
But
just 88 steps. I love it.
but I must say, I actually wanted to update this for the call, and then I thought like it's different for every company.
Yeah.
Monster is a job board, so we have the job posting markup. We need to make use of the indexing API. I think it's good to use this as a base, and then see based on your situation, what do I need to update or further expand. And but hopefully it will give you a starting point.
So you just touched on one of the things I wanted to talk about. So I started experimenting with the indexing API right when it came out. What was that? 2018, 2019. And oops, there we go.
Yeah, yeah,
And what I found was that for the stuff that doesn't qualify, if it's not a job board, etc., Google will still go to the page when you submit it. So
okay.
talk us through what it's like to work with for a site that meets the guidelines. Like, how much content can you, like, what percentage of your site can you actually get indexed when you can leverage a tool like that?
I actually find it still a bit disappointment because in Google basically prefers for static pages, so
Mhm.
pages which doesn't change a lot, like or URLs doesn't come in and out, just the sitemaps. But then for individual jobs, they sometimes they're live for a couple of hours, sometimes for a few days. So it's very short. So if we would only rely on the sitemap, Google wouldn't know of these jobs in time, and also doesn't know when to delete. So with the indexing API, we say to Google, okay, these are new URLs that have gone live, or we can say these URLs have been deleted, delete them from your index, and then crawl them again in terms of crawl budget optimization.
Mm.
And we had from the jobs that we're sending, which is sometimes like, or at least the requests, like maybe it's like 3-4 millions a day, that not even the half gets crawled basically.
Oh my goodness. And there's so much flux so that sounds like a really difficult challenge to stay on top of in terms of the volume of URLs that are going live and the volume that are falling out all the time. So
Yeah.
how do you manage jobs that are, let's say we filled the job, or like, talk us through the content removal process for a job board.
Yeah. So for any static page or page that have stayed live for a while, so just normal pages, we use a 301 redirect to
Mhm.
transfer the SEO value. For jobs, we use a 410, which basically means the page is gone. Google
Yep.
can delete it. And because otherwise, if we don't do that, then basically it would end up in like millions of 301 redirects. So we thought, okay, that we won't use that. So for expired jobs, we use 410s. So indicating
Uh,
this is not an error, it's not a
yeah.
404, but the page is gone, you can delete it.
Can you share with us something that you never expected to be the case or something like that like, what have you learned that's new and unique working at a site like Monster? Like, what's your biggest learning in the new role?
Um, it's a different volume perspective, basically. So in Randstad, it was like you had sites of like 300,000, 400,000, but here it's like Monster, and they recently have been merged with Career Builder, which is another like very large beast in the game, basically. So
Yeah.
you have both websites have something like maybe like 8 million, 9 million pages.
Mm.
And so in those kind of website, the crawl budget optimization, that's really an issue.
Yeah.
So which jobs do we want to favor above other ones? And are we sending are we sending our new jobs to Google? So that is kind like different type of optimization than, okay, what can we do to improve the content on our pages?
I was wondering about that because based on the scale of content, prioritization is a must. And I was wondering if you like, hey, I'm gonna focus on the jobs with the highest value. Like, are you thinking that way? Like you're pushing presidents, vice presidents, directors. Like, do you go top down in terms of prioritization, or how do you think through that?
Um, in terms of scalability. So if I do this, how many pages or markets are impacted?
Hmm.
So one simple thing is increasing the number of jobs that are displayed on the page. It's basically one setting. It's impacting all the pages across all markets. So those more from a template perspective, those are more the optimizations I look at.
Awesome. Speaking of learning, you're kind of driven. I was looking at your personal website, and you've been crazy into sports your entire life. It sounds like it's something you got from your dad.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I was reading through that, I was thinking a ton about my own childhood. Like, where does that inner drive, where does it come from? Like, how do you and what has been the impact on your whole life of that, like, development of discipline, and how can others tap into that? Like, some of us just by nature, hey, I love a good checklist. I want to execute the checklist. And others of us are constantly like pushing ourselves to become better and are crazy, crazy curious. I want to get at where that comes from. Can you make us smarter about it?
So to go very, very back, it's basically when I was like 16, 17, I was like delivering Chinese food on a scooter. And I was just like riding and I was thinking like I can live like this, but is this really like what I want, what I would be most proud of? And then I thought, no, this is something that I need to change. It's not that something that my parents were like to normal school or something. They didn't do masters or anything. So I thought if I want to change it for myself, I need to pursue it myself. So that actually changed a bit to switch and to say, okay, I'm going to try to reach the max and just try to get everything out of it. And that basically, then when you come to a point, then it's like, okay, what can I do next? So I did my bachelor, and then I saw a master. I was looking at the 10 best MBAs in the world, and then I saw in the top 10 was IE Business School in Spain, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. And in Spain, I used to work in Spain for 2 years. I felt like, oh, that's also really cool. So then I got into that master. Um, at that time, I was a bit more impulsive. I was working at a company, and the master started a bit earlier than or so normally in the Netherlands or universities start in September. That master started in May. And I still needed to finish the thesis of the bachelor and everything. So I was like, I don't have time to work. So I went to my director. I said, I need to resign. And I need to resign like next week because otherwise I won't be able to start this master. And she was like, you can't. I was like, I have to. So I was telling her the things. And then, okay, I designed with a very short time. And then I thought, okay, now I'm here, I'm doing my thesis, but I still need to have income. So that was actually the same time that I started my own company. Just we're doing like freelance projects to make sure that while I'm doing thesis, at least I can have a bit of side pocket money to get ready for that master. And then when I was done with IE, I was like, oh, like I want to keep developing because I think if you keep learning and that will make you a very strong asset, that independent how the market will go. So, and that was basically how I got Harvard on my radar. And I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. We only see Harvard in movies. And yeah, so that's eventually how I landed there.
My dad also went to Harvard, and
Oh,
his
nice.
way of targeting it was, um, what department could I actually get into? And he did his master's in in higher education management. So he decided to go to the ed school because he felt like it was the only one he could actually get into, which is
Okay,
super funny.
nice.
Okay, so as you've grown in your career, this inner drive to keep improving has led you to improve your tech skills, your hard skills, but also your soft skills and working with other people and collaborating. And one of the things that's not unique about your life story, but you've lived in so many places. Like, you've lived in the Netherlands, you've lived in Greece, you've lived in Spain. Where are we talking to you today? And tell us a little bit about what it's like to live there.
Yeah. So I'm currently based in Dubai. I moved 9 years ago to Dubai. Um, I was sitting at home in the Netherlands, looking out of the window. It was very cold, and I was like staring. And I used to do like I did a traineeship in Spain before, and I was like, no, this is not how I want to continue. So then I applied on anything that had to do with digital marketing, analytics, SEO, paid search, and then eventually, one agency decided, okay, you can work from us for in Dubai. So that's how I landed there. Um, I also lived in Egypt. I stayed in Morocco for a bit. So what I find is that actually a lot of the people are the same with cultural differences, but everybody like wants to meet people, wants to be respected, wants to have conversations, hang out. So I think it's also, I think it's very important to understand culture, what is culturally appropriate, and I think it makes it for. So, for example, here in Dubai, it's not always common that a man gives a hand to a woman. So for me, when we go to a meeting, we don't stick out our hand first. Basically, we just see like is the man doing that or not. So I think like being open to that, being responsive, and know about these things will help in communication with a lot of different people.
Awesome. We're getting to the end of our episode here, Miranda. There's so much to get into, but I just want to tie this up a little bit. Any special causes that you want to shine the light on, that you want other SEOs to know about? Anything that's really important to you on a personal level?
On a personal level, it's yeah, I didn't want to go too political, but basically making sure like having respect for each other, seeing each other as humans, and uh, treat people how you want to be treated. I think
I
that's
love that.
like have empathy for others, being respectful. I think that's like really from a human level, a human connection. I think that's a really important thing to do, and to also emphasize with others, learn more about each other's backgrounds. I
Mm.
think that is something which I find important.
I think my thing is like lead with kindness, and I fail at that a lot, but like I'm really working on that as my own personal thing for 2025 is just really being kind to people and really digging into trying to help and really putting everybody first. Um, Awesome. There are going to be some questions in the live event questions channel. If you can check in there in Slack and get to them. There's a great question, but it's going to take us another 5 to 7 minutes to talk through it. So if you could get into that question in the Slack community, that'd be great. Just
Yeah,
to tie this up, in 2 weeks, we've got another guest, which will be pretty fun. I got to know Rand Fishkin in the past year and a half a little bit. And so I'm really excited to have him on as our next guest. That's going to be on February 5th. And we'll keep everybody updated in the Slack community about that in the SEO community. Miranda, it's amazing to spend so much time with you. I'm hopeful that
thank you
we
for the
get to
invitation.
actually see each other in real life at some point at a
Yeah,
conference.
yeah, that would
And
be great.
um, we're going to end today's episode hopefully without a hot mic situation like last time. So at this point, I'm going to stop the recording and we should go and actually leave the studio room. Oh, actually, don't leave, but mute yourself. So for everybody else, great spending so much time with you. Be good and